At 80 years old, Eric Clapton remains one of the most celebrated and enigmatic figures in music history. Known as one of the greatest guitarists to ever pick up the instrument, his journey has been marked by triumphs, tragedies, addictions, and reinventions. Yet among all the stories surrounding Clapton, few are as compelling as his lifelong connection with George Harrison of the Beatles. Their friendship, tested by fame, love, and heartbreak, has been one of the most complex relationships in rock history. For decades, Clapton kept much of his side of the story private. But now, reflecting on a life filled with both glory and scars, he has begun to reveal truths he had long kept hidden. To understand the depth of what Clapton feels about Harrison, one must first trace the extraordinary path of his life, beginning with his unusual childhood and his rise into a legend. Eric Patrick Clapton was born on March 30th, 1945, in Ripley, a quiet village in Surrey, England. His childhood was far from ordinary. Clapton grew up under the belief that his grandparents were his parents, while his actual mother was presented to him as his sister. It was only years later, as a teenager, that he discovered the truth, a revelation that left deep emotional scars. This early shock of not knowing where he truly belonged planted in him a lifelong sensitivity and emotional depth that would one day find its voice in music. Music became his escape. From a young age, Clapton showed an unusual affinity for the guitar. He immersed himself in the records of American blues greats, Robert Johnson, Muddy Waters, and B.B. King. These musicians did not just entertain him. They became his teachers, his guides, and his connection to something bigger than himself. The raw honesty and pain embedded in the blues mirrored his own inner turmoil. Clapton began imitating their styles, eventually developing his own voice, a sound both technically precise and emotionally devastating. As a teenager, his dedication was so intense that his fingers would bleed from practice. Yet he would tape them up and continue playing. By his late teens, he had already developed a reputation locally as a prodigious talent. For Clapton, the guitar was not just an instrument. It was the language through which he could express all the emotions he struggled to put into words. The confusion of his family history, the loneliness of not fitting in, and the yearning for identity all poured out of his fingertips in soulful riffs. This early foundation laid the groundwork for a career that would not only shape British rock, but also influence global music for generations to come. Clapton's professional journey began in the early 1960s when he joined the Yardbirds, a band at the forefront of the British blues explosion. With Clapton on guitar, the group quickly gained attention for their electrifying performances. Yet Clapton, even at that early stage, showed a remarkable commitment to authenticity. When the Yardbirds began leaning toward a more pop-oriented sound, he made the bold decision to walk away. To him, the blues was sacred, and he would not sacrifice artistic truth for commercial gain. This move, though risky, defined his career ethos: integrity over convenience. After leaving the Yardbirds, Clapton joined John Mayall and the Bluesbreakers. Here, he found his true calling. It was with the Bluesbreakers that Clapton earned the nickname "Slow Hand," a term that captured the deliberate, emotional quality of his guitar playing. His work on the Bluesbreakers album quickly set him apart as a guitarist of rare skill, capable of channeling the essence of the American blues while giving it a uniquely British edge. The British press and fans took notice. Graffiti began appearing on walls in London that read, "Clapton is God." It was both a reflection of his immense talent and the cultural moment. Britain was ready to crown new heroes, and Clapton was leading the charge. Yet despite the growing adoration, Clapton remained restless. He was not content to simply replicate the blues. He wanted to expand it, to blend it with new sounds and take it to unexplored heights. That desire would lead him to form some of the most influential bands in rock history. In 1966, Clapton co-founded Cream alongside Jack Bruce and Ginger Baker. Cream was no ordinary band. It was one of rock's first true supergroups. With Bruce's powerful bass lines, Baker's thunderous drumming, and Clapton's blistering guitar work, the trio created a revolutionary sound. They fused improvisation, heavy blues, and psychedelic rock into music that pushed the boundaries of what rock could be. Songs like "Sunshine of Your Love" and "White Room" showcased Clapton at his fiery best. His solos were no longer just technically impressive. They were emotional journeys that captivated audiences. Concerts turned into marathons of improvisation, with Clapton standing center stage as both a virtuoso and a showman. Cream's success was meteoric, but so too was its collapse. The band lasted only 2 years before internal tensions and clashing egos tore it apart. Still, their brief existence forever changed the face of rock and cemented Clapton's place in history. Clapton's next venture was Blind Faith, another supergroup formed with Steve Winwood, Ginger Baker, and Rick Gretsch. Though their self-titled album was their only release, it included unforgettable songs like Can't Find My Way Home. Once again, Clapton showed his restless nature, always searching for new ways to express himself musically. But perhaps his most enduring project came with Derek and the Dominoes. Their 1970 album, Layla and Other Assorted Love Songs, is considered one of rock's greatest masterpieces. The title track, Layla, remains iconic, not just for its searing guitar riffs, but for the story behind it. Clapton had fallen deeply, hopelessly in love with Pattie Boyd, the wife of his close friend George Harrison. Unable to express his feelings openly, he poured them into music. Layla was his cry of passion, longing, and torment. This song immortalized one of rock's most complicated love triangles, capturing the raw emotions of forbidden love. Decades later, Clapton would finally admit how much of his heart and truth was woven into Layla. It was more than a song, it was a confession. Even as Clapton's musical genius soared, his personal life spiraled into darkness. By the 1970s, he had become deeply addicted to heroin. For years, the drug controlled him, threatening to destroy both his career and his life. Concerts were missed, relationships fell apart, and his once bright star seemed to dim. Friends feared he might not survive. Eventually, Clapton managed to break free from heroin, only to fall into another destructive addiction, alcohol. His battles with drinking were equally harrowing. Nights blurred into days and his health deteriorated. Despite being hailed as one of the greatest guitarists in the world, Clapton was living a life of private chaos. What saved him was not just music, but the intervention of friends and his own determination to recover. His honesty about these struggles later became a vital part of his story. Clapton did not hide his flaws. He admitted them, allowing fans to see the human side of the legend. This vulnerability only deepened his connection with audiences. He was no longer just God with a guitar, he was a man, broken but fighting, and that made his artistry all the more powerful. Clapton's most heartbreaking moment came in 1991, when his 4-year-old son Connor tragically died in a fall from a New York City apartment window. The loss shattered Clapton. For a man who had already endured so many battles, this was the deepest wound of all. From that grief emerged Tears in Heaven, a song that remains one of the most poignant ballads ever written. Its gentle melody and heartbreaking lyrics resonated far beyond Clapton's personal pain, offering comfort to millions who had faced loss. Tears in Heaven became a universal anthem of mourning and healing. This song showed the world another side of Clapton, not the fiery guitarist, but the grieving father, the human being stripped bare by tragedy. It was a moment of vulnerability that transcended fame, reminding everyone that no amount of success can shield a person from life's deepest sorrows. In transforming his grief into music, Clapton found not only a way to cope, but also a way to help others. Over the decades, Clapton's collaborations read like a who's who of music royalty. He played alongside George Harrison, Bob Dylan, B.B. King, and J.J. Cale, among many others. Each partnership brought out new sides of his artistry, proving his versatility. Clapton was never confined to one genre. He could move from the raw depths of blues to the soaring heights of rock, from tender ballads to reggae rhythms. His cover of Bob Marley's I Shot the Sheriff not only introduced reggae to mainstream rock audiences, but also showcased his ability to reinterpret songs while honoring their spirit. No matter how far he explored musically, Clapton always returned to the blues. That grounding gave his work authenticity. Audiences believed him because they could hear the honesty in every note. His influence stretched across generations, inspiring countless guitarists to pick up the instrument and chase the same emotional power he embodied. Among all of Clapton's collaborations and friendships, none was more significant or more complicated than his bond with George Harrison. The two shared deep mutual respect as musicians, but their connection went far beyond the stage. Harrison introduced Clapton to Indian music and spiritual ideas, while Clapton shared his love for the blues. Yet at the heart of their story was Pattie Boyd. Clapton's love for her created one of the most famous love triangles in rock history. While it could have destroyed their friendship, Harrison and Clapton managed to maintain a strange but enduring bond. Harrison even invited Clapton to play guitar at his famous concert for Bangladesh in 1971, showing the depth of their mutual respect, despite personal complications. For years, Clapton kept his deepest feelings hidden. Only later in life did he fully admit the intensity of his love for Boyd and the pain it caused both him and Harrison. His confession reveals a man torn between loyalty to his friend and the pull of his own heart. Even at 80, Clapton speaks of Harrison not with rivalry, but with love and reverence. Today, as Eric Clapton looks back on his extraordinary life, he stands as both a legend and a survivor. His story is one of breathtaking talent, heartbreaking loss, and the relentless pursuit of truth through music. From the blues clubs of London to the biggest stages in the world, Clapton has lived a life few could imagine. His friendship with George Harrison remains one of the most fascinating threads of his story, a relationship defined by music, love, loyalty, and complexity. In finally telling the truth about it, Clapton has shown that even legends carry secrets of the heart. Eric Clapton's legacy is not just in his technical mastery of the guitar, but in the way his music speaks to the deepest parts of the human experience: love, loss, longing, and redemption. At 80, his confession is not just about Harrison, but about a lifetime of searching for meaning through music. As the years moved into the late 1980s and 1990s, Eric Clapton once again showed his ability to reinvent himself. Though critics wondered if his best years were behind him, Clapton proved otherwise. In 1992, he appeared on MTV's Unplugged series, delivering a performance that would reintroduce him to an entirely new generation. With nothing but an acoustic guitar and his voice, Clapton stripped down his classics, transforming them into intimate ballads. The standout moment was his acoustic rendition of Layla. What had once been a fiery anthem of anguish and desire became a softer, almost mournful reflection. The reimagined version resonated deeply with audiences, turning the performance into one of the most beloved live recordings in rock history. The album Unplugged went on to win 6 Grammy Awards, including Album of the Year, proving that Clapton's artistry could transcend decades and musical trends. Throughout the 1990s and into the 2000s, Clapton continued to explore different sounds. His collaboration with B.B. King on Riding with the King celebrated the blues roots that had always defined him. He also returned to his passion for the music of Robert Johnson, recording entire albums dedicated to the legendary bluesman. Each project showed a man who, despite his fame, never lost touch with the music that first moved him as a boy. By the time Clapton entered his later years, his place in music history was undeniable. He became one of the most decorated artists of all time, with 18 Grammy Awards to his name. He is also the only musician ever inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame 3 separate times, once as a member of the Yardbirds, once with Cream, and once as a solo artist. In 2004, he was awarded a CBE, Commander of the Order of the British Empire, for his services to music. And in 2007, he was given the prestigious Lifetime Achievement Grammy. These honors only scratched the surface of his legacy. Yet Clapton himself often dismissed accolades, insisting that he was, at his core, nothing more than a blues guitarist carrying forward a tradition that meant everything to him. His humility contrasted sharply with the reverence placed upon him. Fans and critics might call him a legend, but Clapton always saw himself as a student, forever learning, forever searching for that perfect note that could capture the human soul. Like many artists with long careers, Clapton's journey has not been without controversy. In the 1970s, some of his public comments sparked backlash, and decades later, debates around his views on certain social and political issues continued to shadow his reputation. For some fans, these moments complicated the image of a man often idolized as a guitar god. Clapton himself has admitted to saying and doing things he later regretted, particularly during the years when his addictions clouded his judgment. These controversies remind us that Clapton was never a flawless figure. He was a human being with contradictions, missteps, and imperfections, yet even in the midst of criticism, his music endured. Listeners continued to separate the artist from the man, finding meaning in the notes even when the person behind them was difficult to understand. Clapton's legacy, therefore, is not one of perfection, but of persistence, proof that even flawed figures can create art that touches millions. Perhaps the most emotional chapter in Clapton's life came after the passing of George Harrison in 2001. Despite the complicated history between them, Clapton and Harrison had reconciled fully in the years before Harrison's death. Their bond had matured beyond rivalry, transformed into a deep friendship built on forgiveness and respect. In 2002, Clapton organized the concert for George, a tribute held at London's Royal Albert Hall. It was a night filled with music, memory, and love. Clapton stood at the heart of it, not as a rival or a shadow, but as a brother honoring another. Surrounded by friends and fellow musicians, he led the world in celebrating Harrison's life and legacy. For Clapton, the concert was more than a performance. It was closure. It was his way of saying goodbye to a man who had shaped his life in ways words could never fully capture. Even now, when Clapton speaks of Harrison, it is with a mixture of reverence and sorrow, proof that their friendship was among the most profound of his life. Clapton's influence can be heard in nearly every guitarist who came after him. From the soaring solos of the 1970s rock gods to the raw blues revivalists of the modern era, traces of Clapton's style run through generations. His phrasing, his touch, his ability to wring emotion from a single note all became a benchmark for guitarists worldwide, artists as varied as Eddie Van Halen. John Mayer and Gary Clark Jr. have cited Clapton as a guiding light. Beyond his technical brilliance, it was his honesty, his willingness to put his entire soul into his playing, that set him apart. Clapton did not just play guitar, he told stories through it. In this way, Clapton kept the blues alive, ensuring that the music of Robert Johnson, Muddy Waters, and B.B. King continued to echo in modern forms. His work bridged eras, proving that even in an ever-changing world, the blues remain timeless. Now at 80, Eric Clapton stands not only as a survivor of rock's most turbulent years, but as a storyteller who has lived every note he played. His music carries the weight of his childhood struggles, his battles with addiction, his devastating loss as a father, and his complicated love for Pattie Boyd. And then there is George Harrison, the friend, the rival, the brother. In telling the truth about Harrison, Clapton has revealed not scandal, but humanity. Their story was never simple, never clean, but it was real. And in music, that reality became immortal. Clapton's legacy is more than awards or accolades. It is the ability to connect pain and beauty, love and loss, into something eternal. His guitar remains the voice of a man who has lived through contradictions, yet never stopped searching for meaning. As he reflects on Harrison, on Boyd, and on a lifetime of music, Clapton leaves us with the truth. Even legends are human, and sometimes their greatest confessions come not in words, but in the songs that outlive them.